night has fallen, and the sky out there is so still that you can almost hear the sound of your own breathing. A gentle light glows in the distance, small stars suspended in the quiet vastness, as if time itself were moving more slowly than usual. If you wish, let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to become steady and light, and simply listen. There's no need to hurry to understand. No need to search for answers right now. Tonight, we will reflect together on something very distant and yet very near. The universe is quietly expanding, a moment by moment, in a silence we rarely notice. Much like the way a space within the mind slowly opens when everything around us grows calm. Think of this as a small pause, a space where science is told very slowly, a place where you can rest, reflect, and let this journey begin gently. Before the expansion, when the universe had not yet taken shape, try to imagine a moment very far away, so far that every familiar image seems unable to reach it. It is not a dark place, because darkness still requires space in order to exist. It's not a silence, because silence still requires time to be felt. It is a state in which everything familiar to us, the sky, light, distance, motion, had not yet appeared. When we look up at the night sky, we often feel that the stillness of the universe is endless. Yet even that stillness is still something, still a vast space in which stars hang suspended, still a quiet flow of time carrying everything gently forward. But before the universe began to expand, perhaps there was not even such stillness. There was no distance between 2 points, because there were no points to measure. There was no before or after, because time had not yet begun to flow, had not yet opened a path along which moments could follow one another. It is difficult for the human mind to reach an idea like this. We are accustomed to everything having a place, a rhythm, a change, however slow. But there, in that primordial state, perhaps there was no rhythm at all, no motion, no waiting, nothing that could be named in the familiar words we use. And perhaps the gentlest way to think about this is not to try to picture a scene, but to sense a stillness deeper than any sleep. Like the moment when you close your eyes at night, and in the brief instants before dreams arrive, there is a very deep quiet, where thoughts grow sparse, where even the feeling of time becomes indistinct. It is not non-existence, but another kind of existence, one that does not require motion or form. If we listen very slowly, we may notice that even in ordinary life, there are small moments that carry something of this state. When you sit quietly, doing nothing at all, not hurrying, not expecting, simply being there, within a pause that has no purpose. Such moments often pass lightly, almost without a trace, yet they hold a very deep peace within them. Perhaps the state before the universe began was peaceful in this way, but on a scale we can hardly grasp. There was no light to shine, no darkness to cover, no space to expand, no time to count the passing seconds. Only a stillness, completely still. Sometimes, when thinking about this, one may feel a slight disorientation, as if the mind were standing before a door it does not know how to open. But in truth, there's no need to open that door. There's no need to understand it completely. Simply standing before it and sensing the vastness of what we do not know is already enough. The universe we know today is filled with movements that are slow yet unceasing. Galaxies drift apart, light crosses immense distances, time quietly carries everything forward. But all of these things once did not exist. And that thought, in its own way, brings a very quiet feeling. For when there is no time, there is no haste. When there is no space, there is no distance to cross. There is nothing that must happen, and nothing that is waiting to begin. Like the surface of a lake on a windless night, when the water is so still that it reflects the entire sky, yet even more silent than that. Because here, there is no water, no sky, no reflection, only an absolute quiet beyond every image we might borrow from the familiar world. And then, at a point that the word point can only approximate, that stillness began to change, not with a thunderous explosion, not with a dramatic moment like those in the stories people often tell. Perhaps it was far gentler, like a first breath after an infinitely long pause, like a very small ripple spreading across a motionless surface, almost without a sound. But before that change occurred, there was still a profound silence. And that silence, in a certain way, is the foundation of everything that exists today. Every star, every planet, every ocean, every living being, and even the thoughts passing through your mind at this moment. All of them have their origin in a state without form, without time, without space. When we reflect on this slowly, we may feel a very gentle connection with the universe. Not the connection of numbers or theories, but a simpler feeling that everything, no matter how complex, once began in a very deep stillness. And perhaps in a very small way, each time we allow ourselves to pause, to breathe a little more slowly, to set down heavy thoughts, we too are touching a similar stillness, if only for a moment. There is no need to understand everything, no need to imagine it clearly. It is enough to sense that somewhere in the depths of the universe, there once was a state so peaceful that even the concept of peace did not yet exist. A stillness that did not need to be noticed, did not need to be named. And from that, everything began. But even now, while that journey has not yet unfolded, we may remain a little longer in that primordial quiet, where nothing is hurried, nothing is demanded, nothing needs to be held on to. There is only a feeling of vastness, gentle and peaceful, like a space where the mind can rest before the first stars slowly appear in another story at another time, drifting in very slowly, very softly, like the breathing of the night itself. The Big Bang, the moment of beginning, and then, within that profound stillness, something very subtle began to occur. It was not a sound, nor a sudden flash of light. No noise echoed, no tremor signaled its arrival. If it can be called a moment, it was a moment so gentle that it was almost impossible to perceive. Like the way night slowly fades before dawn, though no one can point to the exact second when darkness begins to withdraw. This change was unlike anything familiar to us. It was not an explosion in space, because space as we understand it did not yet exist to contain any explosion. Instead, space itself began to open, as if something that had long been silent and closed gently, loosened and widened, unhurried, without sound, simply beginning to grow. If an image is needed to imagine it, one might think of a drop of ink falling into still water. At first, the color is dense, almost unmoving. Then, very slowly, delicate threads of ink begin to spread, dissolving into the clear water, creating no waves, making no sound, only a soft diffusion, almost meditative. There is no clear boundary between before and after, only a movement that is very slow, very steady, like a breath gently expanding. The beginning of the universe may have carried a similar gentleness. Not an eruption, but an expansion. Not matter flying into space, but space itself gradually growing, carrying everything within it, like the surface of a balloon as it is slowly inflated. The tiny points on that surface do not move by themselves, yet the distance between them slowly increases, simply because the surface itself is quietly expanding. And all of this happened in a silence so deep that there was no sound to record it, no observer to witness it. There was only the presence of a first movement, so light that, if it could be felt, it might resemble the sensation of breathing in very slowly, the chest opening without effort, without urgency, only a natural widening. Time, as we experience it today, also began with that expansion. It was not a flow that had already existed, but a very faint current just coming into being, like the first ripples upon a still lake. Before that, there was no before, and afterward there was not yet an after, only a beginning so gentle that it was as if the very concept of a moment had just been born. Light then was not yet like the light we know. Matter had not gathered into stars. There were no galaxies, no familiar forms of any kind. Everything was still like a very fine mist, very hot, very dense, yet still expanding, still softening, still quietly changing, little by little, within the infinite patience of the universe. If one could stand outside to observe, there might be no dramatic spectacle to see, no brilliant sparks, no violent waves, only a very slow, very steady unfolding, like the way a flower opens in darkness, petal by petal, so gradually that no one can recognize the precise moment when it begins to bloom. And within that expansion, the first distances were born, distances so small as to be almost unimaginable. Yet they became the foundation for all distances that would follow. Between stars, between galaxies, between distant shores on a small planet that billions of years later would be called Earth. Thinking about this can sometimes bring a quiet sense of peace. That everything vast we see today, every star-filled sky, every silent night, began from a movement so gentle it was almost imperceptible. Not from chaos, but from a slow, patient, and enduring unfolding. The universe then was not in haste. It did not need to arrive anywhere, did not need to complete anything. It simply expanded, little by little, like a very long breath stretching across millions of years, then billions of years. A breath that is still continuing even now, in this moment, as you listen to these quiet words in the night. Perhaps in some way, that expansion is still continuing at this very moment, in a stillness we do not notice. The distances between galaxies are still increasing, making no sound, creating no tremor, only a gradual change, like the way darkness deepens as the night passes, or the way breathing becomes steadier as the body relaxes. And strangely, when we think about this slowly, we may feel that the expansion of the universe is not something distant. It carries a rhythm that is deeply familiar. The rhythm of processes that unfold slowly, quietly, without display, yet never cease. The rhythm of time when we are not looking at a clock. The rhythm of a long night when the mind is allowed to drift freely, without trying to hold on to any thought. This is how the universe began. Not with a bang, but with an opening. Not with a violent event, but with a movement that was gentle, enduring, and quiet. And if we remain with that thought a little longer, we may sense that this expansion is not only the story of distant stars, but also a very gentle reminder that everything in nature can unfold slowly, without haste, without strain. Like this very moment, as the night continues to pass, as the space around you remains quiet, as your breathing stays steady and light. And somewhere, very far away, the universe is still expanding, silently, patiently, as if it has infinite time to become itself. And we too may remain in this stillness a little while longer, simply to listen, simply to feel, before the first lights of the stars begin to appear in the story, very slowly, very far away, like small points of light gradually emerging in the sky of a windless night. First light, the first light of the universe. And while that expansion continued, very slowly, very steadily, the universe began to change in a way that was almost impossible to notice in any single moment. No longer in the dense and burning state of its earliest time, everything gradually softened, like an object once heated until it glowed red, which, when left undisturbed long enough, quietly cools, its colors shifting from brilliance to deeper tones, and then slowly settling into stillness within the dark. This process did not happen in an instant. It unfolded across spans of time so vast that if one could have stood there watching, perhaps no change would have been noticed between two blinks of the eye. But the universe was not in haste. It was patient, like the deepest processes in nature, allowing the temperature to slowly fall, allowing motion to grow gentler, allowing the initial turbulence to quietly settle, like fine silt sinking to the bottom of a lake that has just been stirred. And then, within that gradual cooling, something very subtle began to occur. Light, which before had been held within a dense veil of matter, began to move freely. It was not a brilliant instant, like a lamp being switched on in a dark room. It was far gentler, like morning mist slowly dissolving, revealing the first light of day, faint and soft, with almost no clear boundary between darkness and brightness. That first light was not the light of stars, for stars had not yet formed. It was the light of the universe itself, a very ancient echo of the early burning age, now gentle enough to travel through space without being held back. It spread in every direction, silently, without purpose, simply moving, like small ripples expanding across the surface of still water. If one could have seen the universe then, there might have been no distinct points of brightness, only a very fine, even glow, filling everything, like a twilight that never ends, where there is no sun, no horizon, only a soft radiance stretching quietly in all directions. That light, in a way, is still here even now. It has traveled for billions of years. It has cooled. It has grown so faint that human eyes cannot see it. Yet it continues to drift through space, like a very distant echo of the moment when the universe first became transparent. Astronomers today call it the cosmic background radiation. But if we listen with imagination, we may think of it as an ancient light still whispering, still quietly telling the story of the earliest days, very softly, from very far away. Thinking of this can sometimes bring a deep sense of peace, that within the silent expanse we look upon each night, there are rays of light that began their journey at a time almost beyond imagining. They have crossed immeasurable distances without weariness, without haste, simply continuing onward, like time itself continues to pass while we sleep unnoticed. The universe then still held none of the familiar forms. There were no galaxies slowly turning in the dark, no clusters of shining stars, no planets circling warm suns. there was only a vast space, opening, cooling, and gradually becoming more transparent, so that light could pass without being scattered or confined. That transparency was like the way a lake becomes so calm and clear that one can see to its depths. At first, the water is clouded, moving, reflecting distorted images. But when everything settles, when there is no wind, no disturbance, the surface grows quiet, and light can travel deeper, farther, more gently. The first light of the universe was like this. Not a sudden appearance, but the result of a settling, a softening, a patient process whose very slowness created its silent beauty. And within that quiet, the universe began to enter a new phase, though there was no clear boundary to mark it. Light continued to travel, space continued to expand, temperature continued to fall, all unfolding in a rhythm so slow that if it could be heard, it might resemble a single deep, unbroken breath lasting millions of years. Perhaps, in some way, the night sky we see today still carries a memory of that first light, not in its form, but in its stillness, a vast, gentle stillness, unhurried, undemanding, simply present, covering everything like a soft blanket woven of darkness and distant light. And when we reflect on this, we may feel that the universe is not a cold or distant place. It is more like a very wide, very quiet space, where everything unfolds with infinite patience. Light is not in haste. Space is not in haste. Even time itself seems to move with a rhythm that is slow and even, as though it were whispering rather than speaking aloud. If we listen deeply, we may sense that rhythm within ourselves, in the way the breath moves in and out, in the way the body gradually relaxes as the night deepens, in the way thoughts slowly grow fewer, leaving behind a soft and spacious quiet. And somewhere, very far away, the first light of the universe is still continuing its journey, still passing through space, still carrying the memory of a time when endless darkness first became clear, when light first learned to travel very far without being held back. Perhaps if one could stand within that moment, there would be no dazzling spectacle, only a gentleness spreading outward, like the dim glow of dawn through mist, like a small candle burning in a silent room, not driving away the darkness, but making it deeper, calmer, more serene. And that journey still continues, very slowly, very softly, like the breathing of the universe itself, quietly carrying everything forward through a long night without end, where light and darkness exist together, drifting together, telling their story without haste, without needing to be heard, simply continuing within the infinite peace of space. Galaxies begin to form, islands of light. And while that ancient light continued to drift through space, the universe gradually entered a new state, though there was no clear boundary to mark when this transformation began. Everything was still very sparse, very quiet, yet no longer completely uniform as before. In places far away, regions of matter, slightly thinner here, slightly denser there, began slowly to feel the gentle pull of their own gravity. It was not a force that was strong or sudden. It was like tiny grains of dust in the air, slowly gathering in a corner of a room. No one notices them moving, yet over time, a thin layer forms. Gravity is much the same. A pull so soft, so patient, almost impossible to notice in any single moment, yet never ceasing. Vast clouds of gas, spread across the cooling expanse of space, began quietly to draw inward, over millions of years. There was no sound, no haste, only a very slow contraction, like an exhaled breath that pauses, then continues a little farther, gentle and even. If one could have observed this process, perhaps nothing would seem to change within the span of a human life. Everything unfolded too slowly, too subtly, like a mountain worn down by wind and rain over millions of years, or a river bending its course little by little, never in a hurry. And then, within that long and quiet contraction, denser regions gradually grew warmer, brighter. Not with dazzling light, but with the first faint points of radiance, very small, very distant, beginning to glimmer in the vast darkness. The first stars were born in this way, not in a single explosive instant, but through a process that was silent, enduring, and patient to the point of stillness. Their light did not erase the darkness around them. The darkness remained, deep and quiet as before. Yet now, within the immense expanse, there were small points of brightness, like silent islands rising within an endless ocean of night. In time, other clouds of gas also began to contract, also began to form stars of their own. And those stars did not stand alone. They gathered into groups, then into larger clusters, all held together by the same gentle, invisible pull, always present, never loud. The first galaxies gradually formed in this way. Islands of light drifting in the dark ocean of space, turning slowly and quietly, holding within them billions of stars. Each star a small point of light, each point of light a very long story that no one had yet heard. If one could have seen the universe then from afar, it might have resembled a vast night sky where points of light began to appear here and there, without any clear pattern, yet forming a beauty that was gentle and serene. There was no sound, no rapid motion, only very slow rotations, very long orbits, rhythms stretching across hundreds of millions of years. And within that slowness, the universe seemed to be learning to become richer, more varied, yet still keeping the same quiet rhythm it had always known. Nothing was hurried. Nothing was forced. Everything unfolded according to a natural cadence, like a great forest growing through the seasons. No one hears the trees growing, yet over time the canopy thickens, and the shade grows deeper. Gravity, that silent pull, continued its work without rest, without weariness. It gathered clouds of gas, held stars together, and shaped immense spirals turning slowly in the darkness. And within each of those slow revolutions, light and shadow wove together like very long waves upon a shoreless sea. Perhaps, if we listen with imagination, we can sense that rhythm. A rhythm without sound, yet still present. The rhythm of rotations lasting hundreds of millions of years. The rhythm of clouds of gas contracting slowly, deeply. The rhythm of light spreading outward from newborn stars, traveling through space in absolute silence. And strangely, when we think about this slowly, it can bring a profound sense of peace. That in the vast universe, everything has its own time. There is no haste, no pressure to become something at once. A star may take millions of years to form, and this is entirely natural, entirely untroubled. Perhaps, in a very small way, that rhythm exists in our own lives as well. In the way a thought gradually takes shape, in the way a feeling settles, in the way a night passes slowly when we allow ourselves to rest without trying to control time. The universe, in that era, was no longer a uniform darkness. It had begun to hold regions of light, structures and forms immense and distant, yet still immersed in profound stillness. Galaxies turned slowly, like enormous petals opening in the dark. each petal a band of stars stretching across hundreds of thousands of light years, yet moving so gently that, if one were near, there might be nothing to feel but quiet. Light from the first stars began its long journey, crossing vast distances unobstructed, unhurried, simply continuing, like a whisper that lasts for billions of years. And while all of this was unfolding, the universe continued to expand, continued to cool, continued to change. Yet always with a rhythm that was slow, gentle, almost lulling. If we remain with that thought a little longer, we may imagine a very ancient night sky, where the first galaxies had only just appeared, scattered like islands of light in a dark ocean. There were no waves, no wind, no sound of any kind, only the presence of distant light and deep darkness existing together in a quiet balance. And that journey still continues, very slowly, very far away, very quietly, as the islands of light grow more numerous, grow larger, turning in the darkness like dreams drifting within the deep sleep of the universe, where everything has its own time and nothing ever needs to be in a hurry. Discovery of expansion. When humans realize the universe is growing, and while those galaxies continued to turn slowly in the darkness, while light still traveled silently across vast and unimaginable distances, in a very small corner of an ordinary galaxy, on a planet with a gentle atmosphere and quiet oceans, there were beings who began to look up at the night sky. At first, they simply looked as people have always looked. Not to measure, not to explain, but only to feel. The night sky has long carried a very particular sensation, both familiar and distant, both still and profound. The stars seemed motionless, suspended in the void, as if the sky were a silent curtain, unchanging, unmoving. For a very long time, people believed the universe was as still as it appeared, that those points of light remained in their places, like small lamps in a dark room, going nowhere, changing nothing. That thought carried a sense of stability, as if the universe were a steady place, unmoving, unchanging. But then, very slowly, very quietly, a few people began to look more closely. They did not only look with their eyes, but with telescopes, patient instruments that gathered light from very far away, light that had traveled for millions of years to reach the place where they stood. Among those observers was a man named Edwin Hubble. He was not a loud man, nor one who sought drama. Much of his work was simply observation. Observation carried out over long periods, with patience, like someone sitting beside a window watching the rain fall, without haste, without expecting anything sudden. Light from distant galaxies entered the telescope, faint and fragile, yet still carrying very subtle traces, like an old letter that still holds the scent of the places it has passed through. And when those traces were examined carefully, something unusual began to appear. The light from the galaxies was not exactly like familiar light. It was shifted slightly, very slightly, so small a change that it was difficult to notice, like a sound growing lower in pitch as its source moves away. The color of the light was the same. It drifted gently toward red, like a sunset lingering longer than usual. That shift would later be called redshift, but at the time, it was only a very subtle sign, a quiet whisper in the data, almost easy to overlook without long and patient attention. And then, as observations continued to accumulate, as more galaxies were studied, an idea began to form, very slowly, very gently, like an image gradually emerging from mist. The galaxies were not standing still, they were moving away from us. This realization did not arrive like lightning. It came like dawn, very slowly, very softly, so that at first that almost no one noticed that the light had changed. But once it was seen, it could not be unseen. If the galaxies were moving apart, that meant the distances between them were growing. And if distances were increasing in every direction, then perhaps space itself was expanding, like a fabric being gently stretched, carrying every point upon it farther from the others in a natural way. That idea, in some sense, echoed what had been happening since the earliest times. The quiet expansion continuing, unceasing, tireless, stretching across billions of years, continuing even now, in this very moment. But what is remarkable is not only the expansion itself, but that small beings on a distant planet had come to notice it. After billions of years in which the universe expanded in silence, there were finally eyes that looked upward and understood, even if only in a very small way, that the sky was not as still as it seemed. Perhaps on a very quiet night, looking up at the stars, we can still feel that stillness. The sky still seems motionless. The constellations remain where they have always been, familiar, unchanged. Yet deep within that stillness, galaxies are still drifting. Very slowly, very far away, making no sound, leaving no trace that the unaided eye can see. That motion is like the movement of the hour hand on a great clock, so slow that, if we watch for only a few minutes, we might think it does not move at all. But if we return after a long while, we see that it has traveled far. The universe is like this. A movement so slow, so deep, unfolding across spans of time that human beings can only imagine, never fully experience. And strangely, when we reflect on this, we may feel a gentle sense of peace, that even things that seem most unchanging are still in motion. Yet they change gently, without haste, without disturbance. Galaxies move apart, but not in chaos. They drift like leaves upon a wide river, each leaf carrying its own rhythm. Yet all are carried by the same quiet current, without sound, without collision, only a steady, unhurried drifting. And somewhere within that current, light continues its journey, crossing expanding space, carrying very ancient messages, reaching eyes that are able to see and minds that are able to listen. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is not the expansion of the universe itself, but the patience on both sides. The patience of the universe, expanding across billions of years, and the patience of human beings, quietly observing, little by little, until they understood a very small part of that vast picture. And if we remain with this thought a little longer, we may feel that this expansion is not only happening out there among the galaxies, but also within human understanding itself. A slow unfolding, step by step, unhurried, imperfect, yet continuing. The night sky is still there, silent, deep and gentle, like a vast ocean without waves. And within that stillness, galaxies continue to drift apart, without end, without rest, like a very long breath of the universe, still ongoing, still opening, while the night continues to pass, very slowly, very quietly, as if there were nothing that needed to be hurried at all. Dark energy, the greatest mystery. And while galaxies continue to drift farther apart, very slowly, very quietly, something else is also taking place, something no one noticed at first. The expansion of the universe is not only continuing, it seems to be gently accelerating, very subtly, as if a river that once flowed calmly were gradually moving faster, though its surface remains smooth, without large waves. This realization came to humanity much like many discoveries do. Not in a sudden moment, but through many years of quiet observation, through faint light patiently gathered from distant places. Galaxies that are very far away are not only receding, they are receding faster than those nearer to us, as if the space between them is opening with a rhythm that grows wider over time. There is something unusual in that thought, like realizing that the night is not only passing, but that the darkness itself seems to deepen as time goes on, even though one cannot point to the exact moment when the change began. And so, to give a name to something that is happening but not yet understood, people chose a very simple term: dark energy. A name that does not explain, does not describe, only gently acknowledges that something is present, something is influencing the universe, even though its nature remains beyond the reach of understanding. In a way, that name is like the way we call darkness, darkness, even though darkness is not truly a thing in itself, but simply the place where light has not yet reached. Sometimes, naming is not meant to explain, but only to allow us to speak of something while still remaining humble before the unknown. And that unknown makes up most of the universe. This thought does not make the universe frightening. On the contrary, it brings a feeling that is deep and quiet, that there are things far greater than anything we can grasp, and that this is entirely natural. Standing by the sea at night, we see only a dark stretch of water reaching to the horizon. We do not see the deep currents far below, the silent creatures swimming in darkness, the slow movements of the deep ocean. Yet we know they are there, without needing to see them, without needing to understand everything, only sensing that the ocean is always greater than the part we can see. The universe is much the same. The stars, the galaxies, the bands of light that telescopes can record. All of these are only a very small part. The rest, the part quietly causing space to expand ever faster, remains there, silent, emitting no light, leaving no easily visible trace. Its presence is like a pause in music, unheard. Yet that pause itself makes the melody deeper, more spacious. If we imagine it, we might think of the universe as a vast fabric being stretched. At first, the fabric widens slowly, evenly. But over time, something causes it to stretch a little faster, then faster still, though no hand can be seen pulling it. The fabric itself continues to expand, as if it carries within it a natural tendency to become more spacious. And what is remarkable is that, even without knowing exactly what causes this, human beings can still sense its traces. Through the light arriving from very distant galaxies, through the growing distances between the islands of light in the dark ocean. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this story lies not in the answer, but in the not knowing itself. That the universe still holds mysteries, still contains regions where human understanding has not yet reached. Like the night sky still holds dark spaces between the stars. Not because there is nothing there, but because what is there is too subtle for us to see. And when we reflect on this slowly, we may feel a very deep peace. That we do not need to understand everything in order to feel its beauty. We do not need to see every motion to know that the universe continues to drift, continues to expand, continues to change in ways that are gentle and quiet. Galaxies are still moving apart, slowly yet without end. Light continues its journey, crossing space that is steadily widening. And somewhere within it all, that mystery remains present, without form, without sound, without color. only a silent presence, deep and vast, like the space it is gently stretching. We do not know what it is, but it makes up most of the universe. When those words are spoken, they do not carry anxiety, but rather resemble a whisper in the night, a gentle acknowledgement that there are things we do not need to hurry to understand. Like lying beneath the night sky, not trying to count every star, not trying to find the boundary of the heavens, simply looking, breathing, and sensing the vastness that surrounds us. The universe, in that vastness, continues to open, a little faster than before, yet still with a rhythm slow enough that everything unfolds in silence. There is no noise, no disturbance, only distances gradually increasing, dark regions deepening, journeys of light growing longer. And while all of this unfolds, the night continues to pass, very softly, very gently, like a still current carrying slow thoughts, guiding the mind into a deeper quiet, where there is no need to search for answers, only to remain there, within the gentle vastness of the universe and of the quiet space within oneself. The far future, a very distant future. And when we think about that expansion, about galaxies drifting apart in silence, the mind sometimes drifts a little farther as well. Not into the past, but into a future so distant that it can no longer be measured in the familiar passing of years. In reflections like these, there is no clear boundary between the present and the future. There is only a very long current of time, still flowing, like a river without an ending, quietly carrying stars, galaxies, and even light itself forward. At some point, far along that current, the night sky will be different. Not suddenly, but very slowly. So slowly that no one could notice within a single lifetime, or even within millions of lifetimes. Yet, over billions of years, distant galaxies will drift farther and farther away, until their light can no longer reach the place where eyes are turned toward the sky. The sky will still hold stars, but fewer of them. The faint bands of distant galaxies, the small points of light once scattered across the darkness, will gradually disappear from sight. Not because they have gone out, but because the distance has become too great, and their light no longer has time to cross the ever-expanding space. It is like standing on a shore in the late afternoon, watching boats slowly drift away. At first, their shapes are clear, then they become small points, and at last they vanish beyond the horizon. Though we know they are still there, still continuing their journey only too far to be seen. The universe in the far future may be much the same. Galaxies will still exist, still turning slowly in the darkness. Yet for observers somewhere, the sky will become emptier, quieter, deeper. One day, the night sky will be darker than we can easily imagine. Not a frightening darkness, but a darkness that is very deep, very still. Like a vast room after every lamp has been extinguished, and only quiet remains, resting over everything. Nearby stars will still be there, still giving off their gentle light. But the most distant lights will no longer be present. And in that stillness, the universe will continue to cool, very slowly, very patiently, like a cup of tea left on a table, gradually losing its warmth without anyone noticing the exacted moment when it becomes cold. There is an image astronomers sometimes consider, a future in which the universe becomes colder and more sparse. Nearby stars will still be there, still giving off their gentle light, but the most distant lights will no longer be present. And in that stillness, the universe will continue to cool, very slowly, very patiently, like a cup of tea left on a table, gradually losing its warmth without anyone noticing the exact moment when it becomes cold. There is an image astronomers sometimes consider: a future in which the universe becomes colder and more sparse, where energy gradually spreads out and no longer gathers into great sources of light. They call this the Big Freeze, a cooling that is very slow, very long, without a clear ending, only a quiet that deepens over time. Yet when we think of this in a slow and gentle way, it does not feel like an ending in the sense people often imagine. There is no noise, no collapse, no final moment. Only a gradual fading, like the light of sunset growing pale in the sky, like a candle burning until only a small point of flame remains, and then quietly going out in stillness. The universe began in silence, expanded in silence, and perhaps will continue forward in silence as well. And when we reflect on this, there is a very particular feeling, not sadness, not worry, but a deep peace. That everything, no matter how vast, has its own rhythm. Stars are born, shine, and quietly fade. Galaxies turn slowly for billions of years, then gradually drift apart. There is nothing that needs to hurry, nothing that must be held. Perhaps what makes the universe gentle is that rhythm. A rhythm so slow that every change becomes soft, causing no disturbance, startling no one. If we imagine slowly, we may see a sky in the far future where only a few nearby bands of stars remain, suspended in a deep darkness. No more brilliant rivers of galaxies stretching across the horizon. No more distant points of light like islands upon an ocean of night. Only a vast space, wide, still, and quiet. And within that space, time will still continue to pass. Very slowly, very steadily, like the breathing of a deep sleep. Perhaps, in some way, the stillness of that future will not be so different from the stillness of the beginning. A great circle, opening from silence, and gradually returning to silence, carrying with it the memory of light, of stars, of galaxies that once existed. And now, in this moment, as we sit in the night, while the sky outside is still filled with distant points of light, it is difficult to feel such immense spans of time. Yet this does not make the story feel distant. Instead, it brings a very gentle sense that the universe has infinite time and everything unfolds in profound patience. There's nothing that must hurry, nothing that must arrive at once. Everything can unfold slowly, lightly, like the way the night gradually deepens, like the way breathing becomes steady as the body relaxes. And in that stillness, we may remain a little longer, simply to feel the night sky as it is, simply to realize that the stars shining before our eyes are a very rare moment in a very long story. A gentle moment, quiet and peaceful, passing within the infinite vastness of space, where the future is still unfolding, very slowly, very far away, like a long road fading into the dim light of the last stars. Closing reflection. Humanity in an expanding universe. And as those images of the far future begin to settle, as the imagined sky gently returns to the familiar stars of this very night, a quiet thought begins to appear, like a small ripple upon still water, that everything which has just passed through this stream of reflection, from the primordial stillness to the first light, to galaxies slowly taking shape, to the expansion that continues even now, none of it is a story happening somewhere far away, separate from us. We are inside that story, not as observers standing apart, but as very small parts of the universe itself. Parts that can look back, that can think, that can feel. It is a strange and gentle thought that the atoms within our bodies, the atoms forming each breath, each heartbeat, and even the thoughts passing through the mind, were once formed in ancient stars. Stars that shone long before the Earth existed. The light from those stars may have traveled through space for millions of years, and their matter, after those stars quietly faded, drifted through the universe, slowly and patiently, until it became part of new worlds, new oceans, new living beings, and at last, part of us. When we think of this slowly, we may feel a very deep connection, not as an abstract idea, but as something real and close, that we do not merely live in the universe. We are the universe, in a form that can see, that can listen, that can wonder. And perhaps what is most remarkable is not our size, but our awareness, the ability to pause on a quiet night, to look up at the sky, and to realize that what lies above is not only points of light, but a long and profound story still unfolding. Within that vastness, human beings are very small, a small planet around an ordinary star in an ordinary galaxy among billions of others. Yet that smallness does not make existence meaningless. On the contrary, it brings a gentle feeling that even the smallest things can carry awareness, presence, and stillness within them. Like a single drop of water in the ocean. Though very small, it is still the ocean. And when we think about the expansion of the universe, we may realize that this expansion is not only the story of space, but also the story of understanding. Over time, human beings have gradually looked farther, understood more, felt more deeply, not in hurried leaps, but in very slow, patient steps, like the way a flower opens in the early morning. Understanding expands in this way as well. Little by little, gently and steadily. There are things we have come to understand, and there are things that remain mysteries. But this does not make the journey less meaningful. Sometimes, not knowing everything creates a spaciousness, a place where imagination can drift, where the mind can rest without needing immediate answers. The universe does not require us to understand it completely. It simply remains vast, quiet, and patient, like a night sky opening before us, asking nothing, urging nothing. And in that stillness, we may sense something very simple. That to exist, to breathe, to look up at the sky and reflect, is already something very rare and remarkable. Perhaps, somewhere in this vast universe, there are other beings looking up at their own skies, asking questions like ours, feeling the same sense of vastness. And if that is true, then the universe is not only a place filled with stars, but also a place filled with quiet moments, where different minds pause, listen, and realize that they are part of something far greater than themselves. But even if there is no one else, even if it is only us here, that is still enough. For the universe has found a way to look back upon itself through the eyes of small beings on a pale blue planet, slowly turning around a warm yellow star. And as that thought passes gently through the mind, we may feel that there is no clear boundary between inside and outside, between humanity and the universe. Breath moves in, breath moves out. The air was once part of the oceans. The oceans were once part of ancient clouds of gas. And those clouds drifted through space long, long before the sky as we know it existed. Everything is connected, not by threads we can see, but by long currents of time and matter, quiet currents that never cease. And perhaps, as the night deepens, As thoughts grow fewer, we may remain a little longer in that feeling. The feeling of being part of something vast, slow, and peaceful. There is no need to understand everything. No need to reach the end of every question. It is enough to know that the universe is still expanding, very slowly, very far away, and that we too are expanding. In the way we see, in the way we feel, in the way we listen to stillness. And perhaps the expansion of the universe is like our own awareness, always opening, slowly and without end.